Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. Whew. How's everyone doing? On a scale of 1 to 11, using your fingers, how are we feeling? I swear, if anyone holds up 11 fingers, I'm going to be freaked out. Thankfully, everyone's like a 5 or above. What? There's an animal in the corner. Okay, so I have a couple quick questions for you guys. First one is this. Who here, by show of hands, has ever been lost in public before? And you have either freaked out, peed your pants, or who here has been lost at a grocery store before? Keep your hand raised if you've been lost in school, maybe first day of school, you're trying to find your classes, not sure where to go. Raise your hand if have you ever been lost in a new friend's house? And you're just kind of like wandering around, / sort of snooping, but you don't want to let them know that you're snooping. But in terms of being lost, transition, let's get back to the point. When I was actually, this is true, when I was actually your age in middle school, my parents decided to surprise me by going to a trip to Disney. You remember, has anyone not been on an airplane before? No? How many have been on an airplane? How many are afraid of flying? Yeah? Flying can be sort of strange. You get a little bit of the jitters. It's kind of nerve-wracking for sure. But I remember I was super young, and for some reason, my message is locking out. For some reason, I remember that my parents wanted to surprise me. So they said, hey, your dad has to work in Florida this weekend, and we're going to go through security. We're going to go to the gate, and we're just going to wave at the plane as he takes off, okay? So I'm excited. I've never been in an airport before, and I remember on the way to the airport, we stopped at this big digital map to where we could see where the gate was, but I didn't see where the gate was. I saw where all the restaurants were, all the terminals were, all the planes were. Do you know how big airports actually are? They're ginormous. Quick fun fact, 1,000 fake dollars to anyone who knows where the largest airport in the world is. Any guesses? It's not Limerick, definitely not Utah. Any ideas? It's not in this country. Say a random country, you'll probably get it right. Asia, close. China. How did you guys know there was some extent of that? So this is a picture of the largest airport in the world. This is the Beijing Daxing Airport. They created it to have a starfish shape. And what's interesting about this airport, it has the exact same square footage of 130 combined football fields. That's way bigger than you. It's way bigger than me. It's way bigger than this building and this whole entire campus, okay? So I remember once we get to our gate, I remember my parents telling me to wait with the bags while they went to the bathroom. And me being curious, me being young, me having the attention span of a fruit fly, I get distracted easily. So I just start wandering around, and I'll spare you the details. Thank you very much. I'll spare you the details, but I was lost for about 25 minutes. And anytime that you're lost, anytime that you're scared, anytime you're unsure of what's going on, 25 minutes feels more like a week, all right? It feels more like a year. It is so scary to feel lost. And I want to zero in on that feeling. How many of you have maybe either been in a crowd, maybe you're at school, maybe you're in a familiar place, but you still feel lost with yourself? Maybe you feel lost with how you're supposed to feel. Maybe you feel lost with how you're supposed to process your emotions. And so the title of tonight's message, if you look at the screen, it's called Lost in Your, and I actually want you to fill in the blank. So you all have sheets of paper, right? Pens and paper. Now, you have the option to draw funny pictures of your neighbor, to play hangman or crosswords. The point of these pieces of pen and paper is to take notes. Because leaders are note takers, and I want you to remember the points that we're talking about tonight, okay? So tonight's message is called Lost in Your Thoughts, and I want you to fill in the blank. What are you lost in right now? As a middle schooler in 2021, are you lost in your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, your situations, your friendships? Maybe you don't know how to handle those. What do you just feel unsure about of what to do? And the reason I want to ask you this is because another true story, okay? When I was your age, I'm who knows what state I'm from? The great state of No high schoolers. Middle schoolers. What state? North Carolina, that's right. Now, what's always funny is the street. Who has a weird street name? Where do street names come from? Like, they're so weird, whether it's Cherrywood, Funny Blossom, or something random. I grew up on Lazy Lane. I genuinely, 1619 Lazy Lane, Google Map it, Stratford Court. That is my hometown. So, High Point, North Carolina, I grew up on 1619 Lazy Lane. In my backyard felt like as big as this lobby right here. And I remember every single day after school, I would finish my homework as soon as possible. And you know what my brother and I would do? We would go into the woods of our backyard, and it was the coolest thing because it was literally our own little world. We would go to all these massive trees with big tree trunks, and then next to them there'd be all these little trees. We would, hedge trimmers? My brother, he was creative, so he unscrewed hedge trimmers, and we had machetes. And so we would hop down all these small trees, and we would make ladders. Okay, picture this. We would make ladders, and we would nail them to trees 10 feet in the air. So from tree to tree to tree to tree to tree, we would have ladders of wood connecting, and it was like our own little world in the back of our yard. And it felt absolutely massive. And it was our own little world, and it was so fun. And so, but what's interesting is that now that, I actually don't know if I'm supposed to go there right now, or later. What's true is that when I actually think about it in my backyard, because that was your height and your size, it felt big, but it really wasn't as big as I remember it. And I know a lot of you may feel things, like if you feel anxious or you feel stressed about things, those are very real, what you're feeling. But I want to tell you right now that you're not what you feel, okay? If you've ever messed up, you're not a mess up. If you've ever lied, that doesn't make you an absolute liar, okay? Sometimes we can be so overwhelmed by these big things, like these feelings of being lost or unsure about who we are. We are not those things. We are trapped in a world that makes us feel like we're defined by our mistakes, but you are not your mistakes. So tonight, I want to give you one verse. Tonight's super simple, okay? I want to give you one verse that will help you in times of feeling unsure, feeling lost, or feeling not know where to take the next step. So there's this guy named Paul. What's his name? Paul. How do you spell Paul? Spelling Bee Champions 2021 in this room. Paul, P-A-U-L. Now, Paul wrote this verse, for we live by faith and not by sight. Look at that. For we live by faith and not by sight. Now, I know that this verse, it sounds like good advice. It sounds like a pretty Instagram quote that you would post with like a flower or a cup of coffee, and you're like very encouraged by it. But I need you to understand the person who wrote this, they weren't living on cloud nine. They weren't having the best day. The person who wrote this was writing it with shackles on his hand. The person who wrote this was actually in prison. And I want you to understand the mindset to be able to not just, imagine yourself in prison right now. It would be hard to be hopeful. It would be hard to be joyful. It would be tough to have some sort of positive thinking. Because what do you see? Probably a cell block. You probably don't see much of the future getting out anytime soon. You probably see some really difficult times ahead of you. But the man who wrote this, for we live by faith, not by sight, Paul, when he wrote this, he wasn't living based off of what he was seeing, but he was living based off what he believed. And what I want you to know tonight is that your faith is bigger than your feelings. Your faith is bigger than your feelings. Now, I don't know why this is, but recently, so I went on vacation, and then just recently in general, the past 2 to 3 weeks, I've seen more of one thing than I have almost ever before. Who here knows somebody, or you've seen somebody recently, who is walking that does not have eyesight? Does anybody know anybody who's blind? Have you seen people walking with a stick and they're blind? What's interesting, and this is just observation, I haven't done any research, anything like that, but anytime I see someone walking who is blind, they always seem like the most calm person in the world. And it's interesting to me. We see everything. We see everything. We're stressed. We're anxious. we're nervous, we're worried, freaked out by flies and stink bugs and those little lantern flies that we want to just delete from existence, right? We're worried about everything because we see everything, right? But people who are blind, they actually are relying more on their feelings because they have to, but they're probably a little less stressed because they're not as freaked out. They're not worried by everything that they see. And so as you go into 2021, we all know 2020 was a heck of a year. Thankfully, that part is somewhat behind us. We know 2021, 2022, it may be tough in its own way, but you don't have to freak out if you see something coming. I almost wanted to have someone come on stage and me get as close as possible. So if I told you to open your eyes and to not flinch, and I had my hand and I just went some of you would probably just a little bit, right? But if a blind person or someone who had their eyes closed, why wouldn't they flinch? Why? Because they can't see. Now, would the same thing be happening to both people? Yes. Almost being hit. Spiritually, it's sort of similar. You will experience things in your life that make you feel like I'm being overwhelmed. I'm lost right now. I'm freaking out. God's not here. God doesn't love me. God doesn't hear me. And you would feel all these things. But what happens when you take that verse into consideration? And you don't just live off of what you feel, but you trust who God has said He is and who He says you are. What's interesting is that a couple years ago, I actually had the chance to go back to my house, back to North Carolina. On what street? She knows it's 1619. Don't send me an email. My parents actually just moved, so surprised many people. So I went back to my old house, and guess what? I watched my backyard. The ladders were this high. And it was from here to there. It was not that big. But because I was so little, and the world seemed so big, I was somebody call Guinness Book of World Records, because this is sick. But as I've grown up and my perspective's grown, and my understanding of who God is, I'm it really wasn't that big. And what you're going to understand in life is that you're going to have things that stress you out. You're going to have things that worry you, and things that make you question, and you're going to want to freak out based on how you feel. But if you trust God, and if you live by faith and not by sight, you'll get some strength, you'll get some growth, and you'll be able to see from God's perspective, He had you the whole time. And I want to wrap this up by telling you that when I was lost in the airport for about 25 minutes, I finally found my parents. And do you know where they were? 10 feet behind me. I was losing my mind. I may or may not have peed my pants. I was freaking out. Do you know why? Because I couldn't see them. But who can tell me why they weren't freaking out? They could see me. And whenever you're freaking out about something, whenever you're nervous about something, you may feel like God's not there. You may feel like God's completely forgotten about you. You're probably the only one freaking out because He's got you. He sees you. He loves you. Okay?